This past summer was intense, especially in the realm of managing our emotionally temperamental staff. Managing staff resistance is something that comes with the job, but extreme staff resistance can rattle your cage if you're not ready for it. Our friend Emily Golinsky offers some insight and solutions to help you quell your inevitable next staff challenge or uprising. This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And I'm Tiffany Gratton-McDuffie, the founder of Purposeful Play, both in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Chicago, Illinois.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are bringing from you pretty much straight from the Tri-State Camp Conference. She just drove home to Massachusetts. Emily Golinsky, yeah, second time Potter. Congratulations,
Yay.
Emily.
So excited to be back.
So Emily had a session at Tri-State called "Don't Let Your Staff Hold You Hostage" that had many camp directors going, that sounds like something I just experienced from last summer. So I had a couple of those situations, people threatening to quit and all that kind of fun stuff. The highlight one was when pretty much 20 staff people from an entire division said that if that guy, pointing to their supervisor, is here on Monday, we're all going to leave. Because that guy said something that was interpreted to be insensitive. And he has a sort of history of that sarcastic kind of wise ass kind of thing. And they decided pretty much before the summer even started that one slip up and he was gone. And it was a horrible, horrible situation, which I tried to fight through. And in the end, after 5 horrendous days of trying to make it work, realized I probably should have just fired him immediately. But it was bad. And it was something that we had never seen before. And it's the kind of thing, just like we were talking about DEI and various things like that, that you hope that in an educational kind of situation where people mess up and people learn from their mistakes and all that kind of stuff, that people have patience with one another and stuff. But it wasn't happening. The civic unrest, the civil unrest, and all this stuff that all these people had gone through the last year and a half has made everybody into these little freedom fighters. And then I was talking to sleepaway camp people across the country last summer who literally had walkouts because they knew that they were holding their camps hostage by saying, we all need $500 more or we're out of here and you're not going to have a sleepaway camp. And one sleepaway camp closed down for this reason up in New England. So a timely topic, my friend.
Wow.
Emily.
Yeah.
So this is real. So I don't know if you knew how real this was, but this is some real stuff. So let's get the ball rolling here. So how do you want to frame this, Em?
Well, I think you said it really well, which is this didn't used to happen, right? This is new. This is coming up, and I think there's a different generation at work now, and as you said, they're freedom fighters, and so I think important for us to talk about first probably is what this generation is looking for in their places of employment, because they will walk out. They absolutely will. So if let's start there. And then we can talk a little bit about resistance and advocacy and ultimatums and all kinds of other fun words.
Awesome. Let's go.
All right. Well, I think it's important for us to know what Gen Z is looking for. They are different than millennials. They are different than Gen X. They are different than the generations before them in that they are growing up in a time where they have a lot of cynicism. They've grown up in a time of just rampant misinformation, right? They don't necessarily view leadership as honest, right? And they get mixed messages about people that lead them. And so to combat that, they're looking for jobs where they, can have a net positive impact on the world, which is fabulous. And a few years ago, we would make fun of that and be like, yes, you want to make a difference, fabulous. But in reality, they truly need to feel that they are making a difference, and there's a difference between wanting to and needing to. And all of our websites say, come work for, make a difference in the lives of children, and they take that extremely literally. So they want employers that care about their well-being. They want authenticity in communication. They want transparency, and you better deliver on your promises. If you say that there's a certain type of environment or experience that they're going to get, you better make sure you're offering it. So if you have all these great values on your website, or you talk about the weekly values that you teach your campers and those kind of things, and then Andy, like you said, you have a supervisor who is probably an awesome person, but is making insensitive comments, that is not in line with this generation's values, and they don't have to take it, and they're not going to.
Yeah. And I think just going back to the first thing you said, the skepticism, right? Because this is something my son, who's been on the podcast, has talked about, which is that, like, this is the first generation where people actually know that what they see on the news is not necessarily true, right? We all used to just believe Walter Cronkite when he just told it. Now I watch the news and I'm just like, yeah, that's BS. Yeah, that's BS, because we just have learned that a lot of it's interpretive, right? What comes forth to us. And I think that a lot of camp operators, directors, whatever you want to call the people higher up, they feel like, well, I should just say things and they should just believe me. And yeah. that train has left the station.
That's the show that we used to put on. We think about, for 2 or 3 days, we have staff coming in and doing small trainings and things, but the kickoff to staff training, the big shiny show, they don't want the show. They just want to see what's real. They don't need to be sold on something unless that something is going to be followed up on. And they also truly want their supervisors and the people that run the businesses that they work for, they expect that people will take action to address moral blind spots. It's not okay to just sort of say, yeah, we're working on it, or yep, we're aware it's an issue, we're trying. They are not going to wait around necessarily. Now, we're making big generalizations, right? And that's what, generations are about, kind of generalizing what the group needs. But this generation specifically truly believes you as a supervisor, a director, an owner of a business need to want the feedback that we're providing you. Not only do you need to want it, but if you're not listening to it, you're part of the problem. And so they're coming into a supervisory relationship already kind of, aggressive isn't the right word, but sort of aggressive.
Yeah, it's not, you said listening. I don't think listening is the problem. They want you to take immediate action. That's what they expect.
They do. And they don't, and this is what goes into managing resistance for staff or dealing with ultimatums, which obviously we're going to get into, is that they truly don't have the picture of the forest. They are hired and, to manage the trees, and that's what we want. And also they are coming up with solutions that they don't necessarily see that we cannot implement at a forest level immediately. And it's not their job to know, but also then they're coming up with this advice and then we're taking our time to try and have to be like, we just can't do that. And here's the reasons why. But they don't hear that message as here are the legitimate reasons why. They hear you're blocking an honest attempt to make something better.
Right. Well, because they're also seeing things from the ground up. They're at a sort of micro level, whereas they're talking to people who are seeing the whole big picture as a macro level. For instance, like, at my camp, I may have told the story that I had a Black Lives Matter flag because my staff was asking for it and I was all about it. And I put it up. There were a lot of parents that really freaked the heck out, including some Black parents, by the way. And so they have to understand that all stakeholders are not the same in a lot of these situations and see the big picture.
And it is so interesting because this generation, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, representation, it's not a nice to have. It's an essential. It is core to their personal identities and who they are. And they have grown up in an era where that is celebrated. And so they kind of pair being seen as individuals with being respected. And so when we have kind of these blanket policies or something like that doesn't apply to them, they're leading the fight everywhere else in their lives to ensure that not only they are represented fairly, but the person next to them is. Their friends are being represented. Everyone has representation. And they're not going to stop that work while they're at work with us. And so that's why it sometimes becomes, what's the word? It can become complicated, right? Because they are truly doing what they believe is right. And we as employers are thinking, could you do that somewhere else? You know?
I had an experience last summer where my staff, one of my staff people asked, "What do you do?" And my reaction was, they have every right to see the big picture. And, not that they're going to understand when you give them a list of things you're doing, but other people in the organization were like, you don't have to answer that. Well, I did. I wanted to give the good big picture because they had every right to know what goes on for everyone and who's doing what. And
That's such an interesting thing, Sam, right? That's such a great example of like old school, new school, right? Where the old guard was like, you don't have to tell them that. And like to someone like me, I feel the same way as you, Sam. I'm like, no, let's just tell them, like they should know. Like we're in the age of transparency. Like what the heck are we hiding here? It's very interesting.
And that's what it is. When they see the big show, they assume that you're making a fancy thing happening over here so that they don't see what's happening behind the curtain, right? And so this generation, because they come from a place of cynicism with the big show, they automatically assume you are hiding something. And for most of us, that feels like, wow, you're just digging up a problem that doesn't need to be there. But for them, they're just saying, there must be a reason. There must be a reason there's lights and camera over here. What don't they want us to see on the other side? And so for us, it's actually better to just reduce the show a bit and say, here's what you're not seeing. I'm busy in the office taking care of an insurance problem that we're having, right? And you don't need to know that to do your job well, but if that helps you to know that it's not that I don't want to be out on camp with you, it's that these 50 things have to get done by the end of the day. That's helpful to them. They want to be good employees. I think that's the biggest challenge, is that we look at some of the ways that they approach things and assume they're holding us hostage or that they're trying to create drama. And while there are people out there that live off of creating drama and then standing back and going, let me see what happens, right? For the most part, those people are not drawn to work in the camp environment. Most people that are coming to camps are wanting to do good work, to take good care of kids. We just have to accept that they aren't quiet little soldiers that are going to line up and do what they're told.
a few years ago, I had a supervisor that was terrible. She would sneak around corners to try to catch people doing something wrong. And my staff sent letters to the big director about their concerns about this supervisor. So he had a big meeting with everyone. And because they're advocates, because they're intelligent, thoughtful people, they had lots of examples and they wanted to see some action. And it was very hard for her to take. And then my supervisor above her did nothing about her performance. She is now fired years later, but it took them too long to react. And my staff, because like you said, they're very open-minded people, they couldn't take the not knowing and the way they were being treated by her.
And I love that you use that word advocate, because that they are good advocates. And that's something that I really would love to talk about for a moment, because an advocate is not a detractor from your organization. An advocate is a positive thing, and every organization has advocates amongst their employees. So advocates are like champions for a purpose. They truly believe in something and they want to inspire and they want to motivate others to see the good, right? And so if somebody comes to you with a suggestion, or, in the case of the walkout, that may have started as an advocacy and turned into a big detraction. But basically, when someone's advocating really fiercely for something, what we should actually see them asking is the question, what would it take to earn your support on this? Hey, Andy, I really believe in this. I think we should be doing it. What can I do to help you see how important this is to me and the other staff? But they don't always come at it from that perspective. And so we are automatically defensive. We're automatically like, I don't have time for this nonsense, right? Like, this is the last thing I need to worry about right now. Just do your job and I'll do mine and we can all get along. But really, like, staff advocates, we want advocates on our staff. They make things better. They push us to think outside the box and to sometimes, frankly, examine policies and procedures that we've been okay with for a long time, that they are saying these things aren't really okay. And they make us look at that. they offer new alternatives, and they don't have a personal agenda, right? When they get into having a personal agenda or attacking people instead of concepts, or they're not able to provide logic or offer solutions, that's when they start to become detractors and resistors. And that's a whole different person on your team.
I love that you just ended with that, because I have so many like thoughts about this just incredibly rich conversation. But I think that the spirit behind the people who told Sam she didn't have to answer that could have been one of twofold. It could have been like, we've always, you're the boss, you don't have to answer that. But it also could have been this idea of, are they being a detractor? Because when you ask the question, it's difference in tone, like, well, what do you do versus like what you do? Like, it's two different questions. It's the same words, it's two different questions. And so if it's being asked in a way like, I'm out here doing all of this, what you do, like you don't do anything, insinuating that, then that could from a non-emotionally intelligent, I guess, person evoke a clapback response, like, I ain't got to tell you what I do, I write the check. You know what I mean? And that's it could be valid, but not how you should handle it from a leadership perspective. But also I just love the willingness to be open and transparent and say, like, like, this is what we do. Even reaching back to like ACA's Real Job initiative, it speaks to like, yes, this is a job you could have beyond summer, and this is what it looks like, different roles and responsibilities. And so the fixer in me is always thinking like, okay, well, how can we overcome both of those? And it's like, you could have job descriptions for each level, like laid out, and people can go and grab and read them. And that's, oh, absolutely, we want you to do a tour, or you could shadow someone for a day and see what does a day in the life of leadership look like. And I'm sure that once they get behind these computers and talking to insurance people, they'll be quick to get back out there and run and kick and, do some games with kids. So that's really, really interesting for me. The other thing is, everything you're saying, I just hear is baked in the need for leadership development from camp professionals, and really just embracing, like, we do what we say we will. Like, that's not like rocket science. So if you have it written on the wall, you should be held to that standard. Yeah. It shouldn't just become, or don't write it on the wall, like, right, repaint the wall. Don't write it and then be like, how dare you hold me accountable? Like, paint the wall.
Walk the walk, baby.
And, people have to come into a space where they feel like this is what happens here. We set the precedent for how you should show up at work. We set the precedent for how you should talk to the children. So you also, as leaders, have to, really create a mindset shift where it's, this is what happens here. This is what we say. And so for camp owners, it might just be like, this is a hell of a lot of work. Like, yeah, it's too many things at one time. My thought is under promise and over deliver. And then that way you're not in a catch-22. And instead of it being this like smoke and mirrors, shiny object where we told you we're going to do this, but really because of budget constraints, we can't, like, just don't say it. And because the thing is that you break trust with people when you do the opposite. And if you don't think of it just of an employer-employee relationship, and any other relationship with someone your age, someone old school, just like you, if someone consistently lies to you or says one thing or writes one thing and does another, you have the same thing. And just because we were conditioned to take it doesn't mean, that they should. So it's my 5 cents.
Yeah, I want to add that one of my favorite books of all time, leadership books, is The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team by Patrick Lencioni. I recommend it to everybody, that's especially working at a camp. And, after trust, which is super important, is conflict in going up their pyramid. And what Emily was saying of, seeing these people as advocates and not agitators is really, really important. These people are trying to do a good job. I wholeheartedly believe that the many agitators that I had last summer, they were actually advocates. And they really, and like Sam said, they were super eloquent about it, and they had great examples, and they were really trying to do it right. I want that kind of conflict. I want to have the best organization possible. There just needs to be a balance. And I'm wondering, can we set a framework before the season starts, especially, so that when these things happen, we agree to talk about it, we agree to discuss and hear all the sides, but then we agree to move forward with a unified matter, as opposed to my way or the highway, or you're going to be canceled or whatever, which is what we were experiencing last summer, and also because last summer was really freaking hard. Everybody was coming out of a year and a half of staring at their laptops in their bedrooms. We know. Okay. And I don't think it's going to be that bad again for a while, hopefully. But that is part of the 5 dysfunctions team too. You have conflict, you discuss, you hear everybody out with respect and all that kind of thing. And then you decide to move forward with a unified way.
I think there's a lot of, I think, Andy, what you're saying is so important. I think there's a lot of things we can do to set ourselves up to be more successful in handling the inevitable conflict, because conflict is a function of the work environment, right? It's not like maybe this summer there won't be any. It might not be the same as last summer, but there will certainly be conflict. There will always be issues. And I think at camp especially, we're so focused on it's all about the kids. We want our staff to be focused on the kids. We sometimes forget that camp serves 2 groups. Our staff are also participants. They are on the journey with us, and they are young and they are inexperienced in many cases. And if we skip seeing them as participants that also need to learn along the way, we just expect, oh, we'll teach you this during staff training, and then you're supposed to go out and just do this fantastic job. Right? If we skip all of that, then we're really missing the mark, because we should be looking at it as an opportunity to prepare them either for increased responsibilities in our organization, or just look at it as sending them out into the world as the best employees they can be. So when it says that they worked for your camp on their resume, an employer in your town sees that and says, oh, I know that they've had good professional development and that they know how to be a professional employee. And part of that is us setting up systems ahead of time to make sure that they can advocate appropriately. Set up a staff committee. Make the meetings open to everyone. And if you're a day camp, say they're going to be at 7 p.m. every Tuesday. And if you truly care as much as you say you do, then you're going to show up and be a part of this conversation. Right. And then, if you choose not to use your voice in that way, that's fine. But we do have a system set up where you can give input. Here are the 15 different ways that it's appropriate to share. And if you're needing to share outside of those, please understand that we may need to wait and review that feedback in the fall, right? So we have these systems set up to be able to hear your feedback now, and we've planned for that, and we're able to give it a certain amount of time. And other than that, we want to hear it. We just can't hear it right this moment.
That is such a great point. This is something, we're in the midst of this thing. We're in the middle of the war. We need to talk about this when things are calm, right? Whether it's at the end of the day or at night or, in September,
Right.
unfortunately.
I'm a huge advocate for saying, when someone comes to me, for being very honest, which is what you're saying is important and it does matter to me. And as you can see from the look on my face right now, I'm not able to give you my best attention. And in order for me to do that, I need to set a time to talk with you, because otherwise I'm going to do us both a disservice. I'm going to miss parts of what you're saying and you're not going to get my best me. Right. Yeah. So when can we talk about this? And I think it's the difference between, someone coming in with a great idea 5 minutes before 28 buses are showing up, right? And someone coming in with a great idea while you're, having a mid-morning donut or something, right? Like those buses, the only thing you need to worry about is whether or not they get there safely, the children are on it, you're checking it, all that great stuff. The last thing you want is someone whispering in your ear, like, I have this idea for a great activity. And you're like, yeah, I don't care. I don't. When in fact, if they approach it at the right time, you might truly be like, that's amazing, let's run with it.
Yep. All right, I'm going to pause you for a moment, because when the what does hit the fan at your camp, yeah. Okay, you got to call your insurance company, and there's no better insurance company out there than AM Skyer Insurance. Yes, we are huge friends of AM Skyer, and they have been very helpful to my camp in particular over these years, for over 100 years. And by the way, they're a family business. I got to tell you, before this podcast started, I had to call Comcast. Okay. And because of some engineering thing, like moving lines and things like that. And I had to call the 1-800 number, and I had to talk to a robot for 7 or 8 minutes. And then I had to talk to a very kind person from a very foreign country for a while. And it took me so long to get my situation even talking to the right person and remedied. And as most of us know that work in businesses that are like normal sized businesses, small businesses, it's so nice when you can just talk to the people who can make the difference. And AM Skyer is just a family business. That's what it is. Not owned by some big corporation. You're not calling and talking to robots. You're talking to a human as soon as you get there. And you could talk to one of the owners. You could talk to the big, the big man himself, Henry, or you could talk to his 2 kids and soon his grandkids, I'm sure. So it's just really nice to be able to get that kind of service with something that is that important. So AM Skyer, they partner with camps to provide public relations, legal, medical, behavioral support, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference at amskyer.com. All right, Emily, moving on.
Fantastic message. Well, so I think, I think when we talk about advocates, there is the other side of it, right? Which is your resistors and your detractors. And without getting too deep into that, I think the one main point that I want to make for folks is that there's kind of 3 big groups of resistors on your staff. Okay, you have your least resistant folks, right? They're most likely to commit to being part of the team, right? They share your message out there. They usually are positive influencers amongst other employees. And even if you implement change or address, something needs to happen, they're usually going to go with the flow, right? Those folks are great. The second group, they're kind of on the fence, right? They choose whether or not to support you based on mainly how efficiently you manage the situation. How close to their values and their expectations are you fixing this? And they are going to need help moving through barriers and adopting change and being on message. They're not necessarily just going to give you that respect. They take a ton of time and attention. And that's the group we should be giving the time and attention to, because they want to be engaged and active, but they just need to be convinced that you are leading well. The third group is the group where we accidentally spend way too much manager energy, and these are your non-supporters. They are unfortunately unlikely to change. They are not going to support you long-term. And most of the time when they bring up an issue, they are bringing it up to you, but they have already begun an exit strategy. And so they're not there to truly help you. They're there to fix things for themselves. And honestly, it's a very small percentage of staff, but it feels like such a bigger percentage because it takes so much time and energy. These are the people that you got to get out of there.
And in 2021, when camps were 20 to 30% understaffed to start with, there was an inherent reluctance to get rid of these people and toss them like they would have in most years, because they already had one person managing 2 things. So that's what was happening.
Yeah, and it's interesting at Tri-State, someone came up to me and said, it was really hard because they were having an issue with one of these kind of unhelpful staff. That's probably the nicest thing we could call them, right? And they were hesitant to get rid of them. And then when they started to discuss, this is not working, we're potentially going to need to have you move on. Then the staff person, who's very familiar with all kinds of legal language, is, well, I'm your best counselor. I'm your absolute best counselor. I'm out there doing a great job, and then the person asked me, well, what if they are really good with the kids? And I said, the problem that we have in camp is that our job descriptions state all the stuff people need to do with children in their role, but it doesn't say that you need to be a participating member of the team. It doesn't say that you need to positively influence or interact positively with coworkers. It doesn't say that you need to be a good employee of high integrity. And if we put those things in our job description, then someone comes up to us and says, like, you're not going to fire me, I'm your best counselor. The answer is, you might be my best childcare worker, but you are not my best counselor, because counselors on this team that get the credit are the ones who are helping others and are a positive influence overall, not just because you're good with children. That's only one part of the job in a teamwork environment.
That's a great point. I love that.
And then, of course, you have a little bit more grounds to say, if you want to let them go, you're on better legal ground at that point as well. And I'm not a lawyer, right? So, I'm not going to get into the fine print on that, but you can then have disciplinary conversations or records of documentation where you're saying they are not fulfilling, 2/3 of the expectations. 1/3 is taking care of the kids. Here's the rest of it. And they're not meeting those expectations. And then we can hopefully coach them to be better in those ways. But if not, then we can also ask them to go.
Yeah. And, you know, we talk about this all the time. Camp is made up of very nice people who don't want to get into these conversations in the first place, and who certainly don't want to take the necessary action in these situations, you know, fear, whether it's fear of the unknown or whatever. And, you know, it's easy for the, you know, the veteran Andy, Sam, Tiff person to be like, oh, well, you know, when you do it, it actually gains respect from everybody else. And they show that, you know, and it actually, even though you're creating worse ratios, maybe, and that kind of thing, everybody comes together and respects you even more, right? And while you're not taking care of a situation and this detractor is causing such a ruckus, not by not addressing it, you're actually screwing yourself in regards to the respect.
Well, and Andy, you know, you mentioned that situation with the supervisor and like the 20 staff that threatened to walk out if it wasn't addressed. And, you know, in that situation, we're worried, of course, like we're not going to have a supervisor for this area and whatnot, but it's one person. So if that person is truly causing the problem, now in this case, I don't know if they were, right? But let's say they were truly part of the problem. Those 20 staff have a right to feel safe in their work environment, to all of those things. And what is the worst thing that happens? So the ratio gets a little bit messed up. So you send a letter home to your families and say, as you know, at our camp, we believe that everybody deserves to feel safe emotionally as well as physically. We are working on our, restorative practices. We are addressing conflict. We want to let you know that we have let one of our supervisors go because that individual was not able to work with our staff in a way that we felt appropriate. That might mean that your campers saw this happen, or you might know that your kid's counselor is now going to be a supervisor, so I'm sorry that you've had a group change. Most people are going to respond to that really positively and see you as doing something proactive. And so even though you're sharing kind of negative information, you're doing it in a way that says, hey, we're doing what's right and we're doing what we should be doing, and the outcome of that isn't great right in this moment, but overall it serves the bigger message and it supports our mission.
Yeah, I think if you put it in layman's terms, it's like one bad apple can spoil the bunch. And if you put it from a leadership lens, it is leaders need to step up and have courageous communication, right? Like, it's not hard to say that, and who can refute that? It's just that we're not accustomed to having those conversations, or we don't want to have those conversations. We can't form the words to have, as eloquently as you did, to have that conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And yeah, it's simple math. The math ain't math. And if you want to, keep one to refute 20, it's just like, no.
Yeah, and look, I get it, Tiffany, right? Like, I've worked for 15 years in a program with a 1-to-1 staff to camper ratio, right? So I get, the piercing pain through my heart when I potentially lose a staff member and all that requires in terms of rescheduling and everything. I think when we talk about handling ultimatums from staff and dealing with this kind of inherent conflict, we have to just repeat to ourselves, nobody is indispensable. Nobody can be indispensable on our team. We need to cross-train. We need to make sure that if we're committed to running archery for the summer and we only have one archery staff, that we have to say at some point, we may not have archery anymore because we're not willing to let this person control us to the point where, yes, sure, people are shooting archery, targets they're shooting arrows at a target. I don't have archery at my camp, so I have actually no clue how it works. Right. But they can't, I would rather send a letter home to parents and say, second session campers are not going to be participating in archery because we have let our archery staff member go because they are not teaching the character role modeling that we expect, right? I would rather do that than leave someone in place that's causing all kinds of drama. So even if they're a valuable performer for you, we have to be ready to let them go. The
reason why this topic is so topical at this moment is because last summer, we were at a disadvantage. We were outnumbered, like there were so many things against us. Our priority was keeping kids from dying from COVID, right? And we were understaffed while doing it, right? So all these things were hitting us like a barrage, and we kept on taking it like punching bags in when we normally would have been like that, you know what, you're fired. you know?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think that's that collective trauma, right? That's
Yeah.
what you're. Then we need to look to 2022 and say
Yes.
that happened. 2021 was 2021,
Mhm.
right? 2022 is going to be some mix of 2021 and 2023. We're not just suddenly going to like emerge into the sunlight and it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns, although that would be fantastic, right? I think the reality is, though, is that we all have to kind of put some of that aside, because when we have that sort of reaction, like even when I say the word 2021 and think about camp, I feel my adrenaline pumping. I feel like I get that response of like, oh my gosh, I just don't want to do that again as a director. And that, if we carry that forward into our interactions with 2022 staff, they're going to notice. And we're going to unfortunately overreact to situations out of a fear that we're back where we were. So I think when we are handling those ultimatums, it's absolutely true. We sometimes we can't get rid of people, okay? Which is totally opposite of what I just said. Get rid of them. Sometimes we really can't. And sometimes we tell ourselves that we can't when we can. We just don't see that there are other solutions there. And by cross-training and hiring flex staff, if we can find extra bodies anywhere,
Mhm.
right? And making sure that we don't ever promise our parents, you know, every child will absolutely do archery at least once a week all summer. We don't say that. We say, here are the activities they may participate in, so that we give ourselves that flexibility.
It's really smart.
Our own worst enemies in that way.
Really smart too.
Yeah, I think it's that whole idea of going back to under promising and over delivering and not feeling like you just gotta sell it, like sell the thing that's real. And the other thing I think is when you're determining whether to keep someone or not, or like it's like a values check, right? So it's like not only the writing on the wall, does what we say match what we do, but more so like, does this align with who I am? Does this drain me or does this energize me? And what camp owners really don't want to hear, and it's hard, and I get it. I'm an accountant and a camp owner. Like, you may need to take less kids if you can't find enough people, you know, and there's like, that's less revenue. Yeah, life is not about having all the things. It's about being able to trade off. And it's not easy, and ownership isn't easy. Like nothing in life is easy. I don't know who made the rules, but that's the truth of it. Also, it's just all about decision making. And then like every problem that we're faced with is either a mindset or skill or a resource. So if you find yourself where you have to keep people that you really feel like are not a great fit, then you should absolutely be like reskilling and making it known, and just how we teach kids, learning teachable moments, and the whole everybody knows, like it should also be the same way. Because oftentimes if you have someone who is a detractor, who's self-serving, who is if you put it on blast and make it a teachable moment for the entire camp, but everyone knows that is the person who did it, they'll probably eliminate themselves. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, they could, because the reason that they are detracting is because they're more self-focused, right? They're playing for the name on the front of the shirt, not the team. And so they usually will eliminate themselves if we as owners are bold enough to call it out, address it, and correct it, right?
Yep.
Like every single time.
There's courage involved, no doubt. And you know, something Emily was saying, you know, about how you phrase archery, that you're not going to get it every day kind of thing necessarily, right? We're selling an experience. We're not selling a toaster. Okay. It's really important. It's really freaking important. And I think that people are, they get into this comfort zone of selling a toaster, because it's a lot easy to sell a toaster than it is to sell an experience. Experience is intangible, right? And that's a really important way of how we put ourselves forth. The other thing is,
Andy, preach.
Thank you. Well, I got one more. And speaking of that, so the first keynote at Tri-State was this guy, Perry Williams, who was one of my favorite New York Giant players. He's great. And he's like a preacher, and he got up there and he was, I have to say, he was killing the cliches. He was just like, we were like over under 50. Like it was unbelievable. But one of the cliches that I have to give you, which is so true, is that everyone is replaceable. I'm replaceable at my camp. Okay. Everyone is replaceable. And like you said, Emily, people convince themselves that this person, we can't replace this person. When I first got into day camping, the big thing is, well, we can't fire that 16-year-old Yutz. That's terrible, because he's the bus captain on the fill in the ritzy town bus. right? And we got to have a staff person on that bus. And it's just like, that was my introduction to day camp. Oh, so we're completely handcuffed by a 16-year-old. Seriously? Right? No. My experience will tell you, you can bribe somebody to get to that bus, or you could put a 30-year-old on that bus. Like, you could figure it out so that someone will get on that bus. And that 16-year-old is not holding you hostage, right? Everybody's replaceable.
Let's be honest, right? That 16-year-old acting like a yutz at camp during the day, you do not want that person being responsible for being the face person that's seeing every single parent on that route twice a day, because then they're doing it without any supervision whatsoever. Like, if you're seeing the problem or someone's bringing the problem to you, we have to assume that that problem is bigger than we're seeing the piece of it. So we always want to be asking ourselves, right? And Andy, what you said about, about cliches, I'll throw another one at you. Do what's right, you'll never go wrong, right? And that, I think, when staff give us ultimatums, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the validity of their concern? What is their actual demand here? And are we treating everyone fairly? Are we keeping our program in integrity with our values? Are we providing the experience, the high quality experience that we say we are? If we're doing all of that, then this person's demands are probably a little bit off target. But we have to hold up the mirror, and sometimes that's hard, right? If they're coming to us with an ultimatum, a lot of times they give us an ultimatum because they're not skilled at speaking. They're young, they're inexperienced, they've never had to approach their boss. And like Tiffany said, that takes courage, right? To have those hard conversations. But we can ask ourselves, is this an ultimatum that might also be appropriate? At which point we just need to teach them the better way to ask, right? I wish you would have approached me like this, because I think what you're saying is valid, but the way you've done it is making me so angry that I want to boot you out of here with a canoe paddle, right? Like,
all right, I got one thing, and then we're going to we have to wrap it up and take it home. So think about some golden nuggets to leave us with. But, and it's just so funny because we've had some heavy day camp pod conversations, and I always have to then talk about like an inflatable thing to bounce around in a lake, but I'm going to do it again. Okay. I'm going to tell you about CRS, commercial recreation specialists, who are just the best. And we saw them at Tri-State. We saw them at ACA National, huge supporters of the camp industry, huge. And they're middlemen and women. They are, even though they're located out in Wisconsin, I don't know if you knew that, Tiff, they are all across the country, North America, finding the best things for camps, and they're camp people, and they know that they're going to put in a splash playground or an inflatable, whatever. They know how it works in your camp. And right now, because we're battling this, this heat wave of global warming, which ain't going anywhere, right? We're about to buy another 30-foot Zoom Flume, which is an inflatable slip and slide, which is amazing. That kids can go flying on and not hurt themselves when they go do it. So they also have those pedal carts at the show, which are really cool. They're a lot of fun for those younger kids, and even older kids, they have bigger ones. And, for someone that's had pedal carts and go-karts, I totally endorse the pedal carts versus the motorized things that break more often. So CRS, commercial recreation, they are the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep camp going strong. Check out their website at crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun. All right.
And fun is what you need to relieve all the stress from everything we just talked about.
Oh, hell.
So it fits right in.
Well,
Hell.
Yeah. They're so subjective. So we're never going to be the right camp for everyone, as staff members or as campers, because they're all coming in with their own previous experiences and expecting different expectations. So as much as we can clarify, yes, but it's always going to be subjective. That's why it's harder than a product, like a, toaster.
Yep. All right, Em. Anything you want to leave us with before we trot out to the sunset?
No, I learned something really interesting that I think everybody should know, which is that polar bears actually do not have white fur. Did you know that?
No.
Their fur is see-through. And so when they are outside, it appears white because that's what's reflected off of it as light. So there you go. Polar bears
and for more fascinating facts, quirky remarks, and amazing staff training, you can find Emily at brightmoosetraining.com. Am I right?
You can.
Oh, I
indeed.
nailed it. I nailed it.
You did.
Yeah. So while Emily is the executive director of a camp for one-on-one, low functioning people and stuff like that, doing that whole camp thing, which is unbelievably awesome. Yeah, she'll travel around and come to you and do Zooms and not come to you if necessary. I was at one of her trainings. She did a few at Tri-State about how to redirect people that are special needs kids that are losing it. And it was phenomenal, Emily. And even though we have great people at my camp that do it, you have a great way of articulating it to the layman. That is really, really awesome.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, that's my training, helping camps, consulting, making things better, fixing the problems, helping bring stuff out into the light and just making it work for everybody. That's my jam. So if I can be of help, please reach out to me. And thank you so much for having me. As always, I love being on the pod.
That's awesome. You're a gem. I want to thank the Go Camp Pro team, A.M. Skyer, commercial recreation specialist, for bringing this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the show notes for this and other episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact information for the show, our guest, Emily Golinsky, and her Bright Moose training website links and such. And we'll put up the slides from her presentation up there. And we'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Day Camp Pod.